Help in Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
We come to elements of new economic policy. Before I begin this, let me share the background why this new economic policy was undertaken or why it was brought into force. What happened was, the year 1990-1991, India was facing a very bad, it was facing a bad condition, in the sense at the international level it was in debt. Means in order to come out of the crisis, it had approached, India approached the IMF and the World Bank for loan. The exports had decreased because of high inflation. Since exports had decreased, as I had already explained, all the other opposite negative effects were seen in our country. And when our country approached the IMF and the World Bank, they put a condition that India should go in for new economic reforms. In order to see that their trade is open at the international level, and due to this they get more foreign exchange, etc., etc., and they are in a position to repay the loan which is taken from IMF and the World Bank. For that, India was ready to introduce the new policy, economic policy of 1991. And this policy was LPG, the short form, or it was called as liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Now we move on to the first reform, liberalization. Now what happens when liberalization takes place? Liberalization means we are inviting the outside traders, manufacturers or businessmen to enter our land and compete with our local manufacturers. When they enter our country, what happens is the scenario changes. There is a tough competition between those manufacturers or those businessmen and our businessmen. Our businessmen also have to be very, very alert, because the market forces are now determining the selling and buying price. Clean competition, increased competition, more number of suppliers, more number of products are now available. Now we see what are the highlights of this liberalization. Liberalization, unnecessary controls and restrictions were thrown away by the government, and the trade was liberalized. As I told you, you could call in the outside traders to do business in your land. Now what happened? The second speciality, or I'm highlighting, abolishing license requirement in most of the industries across the country, except 5 of them. Now listen, when liberalization takes place, you need not worry. You need not worry, no restrictions now. Anybody can come and trade, just some formalities are required, or otherwise it is an open competition. All licenses have been taken off. You need not worry about a license, except the government has kept 5 different industries still restricted and controlled. That is the liquor industry, cigarette manufacturing, defense equipment, industrial explosives, drugs and pharma products and dangerous chemicals are left restricted. They are not allowed. Anybody comes and produces these products, this is not allowed. These are kept intact by the government. Now the next thing, contraction of public sector. Now, soon after independence, we were in a state, in a bad condition, and government came forward through the public sector to see that the nation builds properly. All the heavy industries were under the public sector, and the private people, the private players were not allowed to enter this particular area. Now what happened was, the role, after this new LPG was introduced, what happened was, the role of public sector was brought down. The government decided, let the private players come into force, let us bring down the role of the government or the public sector enterprises. It came down to 17 enterprises, and after the introduction of this new policy, under the liberalization reform, what happened was, the number under private sector was brought up to 3. From 17, it came down up to 3. All others were given to the private people. The 3 of the departments were railways, atomic energy, and defense. I am highlighting defense because if everything goes normal, even defense, they have the intention of giving it to the private players who will work on it and provide better defense facilities. But till now, it is still in the public sector. Now, the speciality of liberalization again was de-reservation of the production areas. There were 800 small-scale industries. 800. If you had to invest in small-scale industries, you had 800 different industries. And what was the speciality was that the large-scale entrepreneurs or the large-scale traders were not allowed to invest in this 800 SSI or small-scale industries. They were not given the permission. Large-scale industries and the medium-scale industries could not put their money or invest their money in these 800 small-scale industries. But with de-reservation of production areas, first it was reserved. Only small-scale producers or small-scale industries were allowed. Now here the role changed. Any big industrialist or a person doing medium-scale business could put his money in this SSI 800, the number is. The next one, liberalization, was financial sector reforms. Here, new private sector banks were allowed. Anyone who wanted to put up a bank was given a permission. He was given the license to open a bank and start his financial transactions. So, private people were allowed in the banking sector. So many in the form of credit societies or in the form of banks. Also, so much it was liberalized. Earlier, this was not the scenario. You had to have a long procedure if you had to establish a bank. But now, this was not the case. Anyone interested in starting a bank was given the permission or was granted the permission. RBI earlier was a regulator. It formed the rules and regulations for the functioning of the other banks and monetary transactions. Now it works as a facilitator. Now facilitator, you here, remember, we had to increase our exports in order to earn foreign exchange because we had to settle the loans taken from IMF and the World Bank. So exports had to be increased, and for that we had to invite the outside traders, we had to invite the outside industrialists to invest their money in our projects. And if we are inviting somebody, you cannot be that strict, you have to help them, and so the role of RBI changed from a regulator to a facilitator. Okay? Now, the last is fiscal and tax returns. Fiscal and tax returns, the tax structure was simplified. Earlier, the taxes were around 51% of the taxes, the revenue to the government in the form of taxes came from the industries, from the industrial sector. Now what happened is, it was brought down to 30% and the tax structure was simplified. It was made so simple that anybody could understand the formalities of paying tax, and when anything is simple, a person goes in for it. So instead of evading the taxes and then facing the penalties or facing the letters come to you and then you have to rush, nothing of that sort. The structure was made very, very simple. And so anybody could pay the taxes, file the returns, etc. This happened after the liberalization policy of 1991. The last speciality, this is another reform under liberalization, foreign exchange reforms. Here again we have to stress on the point, abolishing import quotas, reduction in tariff rates, market forces, etc. Here again I will stress on the point that imports had to be reduced and exports had to be promoted. And if you have to promote the exports, there should be a reduction in the tariff rates which will encourage the exports, and in order to abolishing import quotas, they were also abolished and there would be a free flow of the trade. Here is the last part, market forces. The market forces could operate and determine the price of the product. Now the price of the product is determined by the market forces. When we make a sentence like this, it means the demand and the supply in the country will determine the price of the product. And so this is all about liberalization. The next, we are going to understand what is P, LPG. Under the middle word is P, privatization. Privatization refers to giving greater role to the private sector and reducing the role of public sector. I have already made a mention that earlier, soon after independence, everything, the charge of the economy was taken by the private sector. And the rules and regulations obviously were very strict, and the private people had very little say. They could operate, but to a limited extent. Now, with the introduction of privatization, the word privatization itself will tell you there was a large scope for the private people to come into the economy. private people, when most of the public sector enterprises now were they were the investment from the public sector was transferred to the private sector. When private people are more alert, see, private people are more interested in capturing the market. They are interested in providing very good service. They are alert about what the customers want today, what they will prefer tomorrow, etc. And they will keep an eye on their strategies of production and distribution. So here, in privatization, private people were given more scope to execute the policy of privatization. Government took the following steps. What is it? Disinvestment of public sector. That is, what is disinvestment? Opposite of investment. Investment is to put your money. Disinvestment is to take your money out. Disinvestment of public sector, that is transfer of public sector enterprises to private sector. In order to have a very healthy competition, it is better, the government thought it is better, I should give the sector, whatever was run under public sector was now open to the private people, where there would be healthy competition and they would try to reach out to the customers by providing the products of their choice. Whatever the consumers demanded was provided by these people at very convenient rates, still managing to have their say in the market. So, and here what happens is, when we call the outside competitors to operate in your land, you are also ready with some foreign exchange reserves. This is what we wanted. And then one more speciality of privatization was setting up Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. This board was set up. You know why? Whichever units were not functioning properly, or they had reached a stage where they had to be closed down, or they had reached a point where they had to do something in order to revive, stand back on their position. This was helped by such units were handed over to a board called as Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. This board took the charge of such units, set them back, set them right, helped them to revive and see that they also function in the economy. Now, the third speciality of this privatization, dilution of stake of the government in the public sector enterprises by transferring more than 51% ownership and management of public enterprises to private enterprises. Their contribution was diluted. It was brought down. More than 51% of the ownership and the management of a public sector enterprise was handed over to the private sector. This is what is privatization. Now the third reform, which was very, very essential in order to bring our economy out of the crisis of 1990-1991, earn more foreign exchange and see that we function properly. For that, globalization was the third reform under the new economic policy of 1991. Globalization, as you can see on the clip, It refers to integration of various economies of the world. What happened is earlier there were many restrictions if you had to cross the border of your nation and reach out into the world trade. Now, what was done was the whole world became a small village. Anyone could have a trade across the borders, reach out with their products and services on the required foreign exchange and have a very satisfied customer. From this, globalization has 5 main features. What was allowed? As I told you just now, the word globalization itself means that the whole world turns out to be one economy. There were no restrictions for anyone, and there would be free movement of goods and services among different countries. Different countries could exchange the goods. Anyone could come into your land, invest their money, and satisfy the customers as per their demand, provide them with the required goods and services, and so free movement of goods and services among different countries. The second feature, along with the trading, what one could do is there would be free movement of capital and labor across borders. You could take your capital and invest it in some other country. Some other country, for example, a trader from England wants to come into our country and invest or start a particular unit or an industry. He is welcomed now after 1991 globalization. So, along with the goods, you could have free flow of capital and labor in between countries or across the border of your nation. Then, the next one, along with goods, services, capital, labor, free flow of technology and information. Whatever happens anywhere in the world, next moment you get that news, you get that information. It might be any information, it might be economic, it might be related to a country, it might be political, whatever is happening immediately is transferred to your ears. How? Because the information flows from one part of the world to another part, and this was allowed free now after globalization, free flow of technology and information. You could take, suppose you are putting up a unit in India, you could take your technology and start your business. Next one is a global governance perspective. This was allowed after globalization reform came into existence. A common acceptable mechanism for the settlement of disputes. Any disputes between the countries whilst trading, or you have some difficulties, you have some difference of opinions, they could be settled at one place. And this was possible because the whole world was converted into one village. All the forces came together to interact in the form of trade, goods and services, free flow of technology, free flow of capital, labor, etc. So, this is the end of this particular chapter. Now, let us highlight what we have studied today in very, very short. We saw the title of the chapter, Business Environment. They are the factors which affect, the forces which affect the institutions together with whom the business is carried on, and they have an impact on the functioning of the business enterprise. Then after that, we saw what is the importance of business environment, how you have to understand what is the use. It enables the firm to identify the opportunities that are across and getting the first mover advantage, that is being the first one to introduce an idea or a product into the world market. Then understanding environment was also important because it helps the firm to identify the threats and warning signals. You identify the threats, be alert, change your policies, change your plans and your products too. Then it was important because it helps in tapping useful resources which are available in the environment and with which it can produce, the businessman can produce the products to be served to the customers. It helps in coping with the rapid changes that are taking place all around the world. Understand them, prepare your own plans and cope up with these rapid changes. If you don't cope up, naturally you will be thrown out of the market. The next one, assisting in planning and decision making. Here also, after understanding everything, change your plans, change your strategies, formulate new policies to remain in the market, satisfy the customers and earn the required profit. Now, the next one we saw was dimensions of business environment. The dimensions include the economic environment consisting of GDP, income levels, per capita income, profit earning, productivity, employment rate, etc., which also has an influence on the business and in turn it has an influence on the economy. Social environment also, we have seen how the customs, the traditions, the tastes, the preference, education levels, etc. of the people residing in a country, they have their influence on the business. Later on, we saw the next dimension, that was technology. Technological upgrading helps the businessman to be alert, make the changes. If he was producing something with manual labor, now it is time he changes to online, which is the result of the new technology. Then we have the next dimension, that is political environment, understanding how politics, how the government has its say on the business, the trade and the industry. One should know about the position of the government, its behavior, its attitude towards the business houses, and be alert about the changes that are taking place in politics at the state level, national level, or at the international level. You have to know about it. Next one was, have an idea of different laws, the laws which are having a say in your business. Unless and until the businessman knows about it, he would be penalized, he would be forced to go to a court. If somebody files a case, as I already told you, you cannot escape by saying, oh, I did not know about this law, I did not know this, I had to file, this return I had to file, this procedure I had to complete. You cannot do it, and that is why this legal environment plays a very important role in business environment. Then I went on to explain about the new economic policy that was introduced in the year 1991. And this was specially to bring out the country out of the crisis it was going through, and in order to repay the loan which our country had taken from IMF or World Bank, these economic reforms were introduced. The short form is LPG, and L stands for liberalization. When liberalization is done, all the unwanted restrictions are taken away and you become free to interact with the other factors in the economy. Next was privatization, wherein the major role of public sector was reduced. It was brought down just to 3 sectors. Some were reserved, but major part was now, instead of the public sector, the private sector was concentrated upon by the government, and it was given a major role which was not there earlier. Now the private people could interact, they could have their businesses, and along with the public sector. Why this was done? Because public sector earlier, since they had a full say, they had become very lethargic. Now private people, they always have their interest. They want to capture the market, they want the consumers, and how? They want satisfied customers. And after providing the goods and services as per the requirement of the customers, you can gain the market, and when you capture the market, you get the profits, and when you get the profits, you think of something new and you remain in the business. So this was privatization in short. And the last part is globalization, wherein all the restrictions were taken away. The government wanted the whole globe to be under one shelter, one village. The whole world turned into one village by seeing that the goods moved from one country to another. Services also were provided from one part of the world to another. There was free movement of capital and labor across the border. There was free flow of technology and information. There was global governance, and there was common acceptable mechanism for the settlement of disputes. With this, I'll just highlight that importance of business environment. Why is it necessary for a business enterprise to have a thorough knowledge of business environment is the question found in your board paper. A number of times, if you go through your paper, you'll come across this question asked for 4 marks. So that is why I highlighted again the full topic, wherein you have to now, the businessmen are alert, you have to be alert, students, because this question comes for 4 marks. The next question is about explain any 4 dimensions of business environment, in which I have highlighted 5. Don't be confused in only studying 4. The paper setters are much shrewder than you are. because one paper setter sets one set, answer these 4, the other paper setter sets the next 4. So you cannot say, Arey Baba, I had done those 4. What about this? I did not do. You cannot do that. You also have to be alert. Learn all the 5 dimensions. It is a question again asked for 4 marks. Then this question, LPG, globalization, privatization and liberalization, I just turn the sequence. Liberalization, privatization, globalization can be asked or is found in your paper either for 3 marks or it comes for 2 marks. When it comes for 2 marks, they ask you any 2. Here also, you cannot have your own decision. The paper setters, as I told you, if you go through your papers and you check them, the first paper consists of liberalization and privatization. The next paper says you have to answer privatization and globalization, and the third paper setter is much smarter than you. He asks you liberalization and globalization. With this, I end up my session. All the best to you, students. Stay at home, be safe, and let us have a very good, don't say you are staying at home. Make most use of this time at your disposal, and I wish you all the best. Think that you are going to succeed, and there will be success at your door after you have the determination to succeed. Thank you, everybody.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.